Welcome back to another episode of True Crime with Lux. I am going to be very honest right now. I made a mistake while recording this case. I did not notice that my microphone was not working, so this is the second time I am doing this. I'm trying not to be irritated. It's very hard, but I am moving on. So today, I am going to be talking about the Cinnamon Brown case. It is a bit of a case. It's a case that has twists and turns that I didn't see coming. So I will get into it. Now, Cinnamon ended up living with her father, David, and her stepmother, Linda, along with Linda's younger sister, Patty, and David and Linda's daughter, Crystal. She started living with her dad full-time after living with her mom. It was said that she couldn't really get along with her mom anymore, so she asked if she could stay with him full-time, and he said, yeah, sure, no problem. Now, David owned his own business. He was in data recovery. He even got a job with the Pentagon with his data recovery program. There we go. And so the family was doing really well financially. They were well off. Linda and David started seeing each other a long time ago, and they used to be neighbors. Linda was a part of a very large family. She was one of 11 children, so her mom was pretty busy, had her hands full, a lot going on. And when I say that they knew each other and they were younger, Linda was 13 and David was in his 20s when they started dating. This will be a pattern for David, as we will see later on. Now, when Linda turned 17, she asked her mom's permission to actually marry David. And her mom was like, yeah, absolutely. Go have a good life. She was probably thinking, one less kid I have to really worry about because she'll be taken care of. She knew David and his family. She knew that Linda would be taken care of financially and all of that. So they ended up getting married in Vegas in 1979. They ended up moving around a bit before they finally settled down in Orange County, California. They did get divorced for a little bit, but they ended up remarrying not long after. And after they remarried, Linda's younger sister, Patty, ended up moving in with them. And at the time, Patty was 12 years old. It was said that it was a possibility that Patty was being molested by somebody around her. It wasn't confirmed. Nobody knows who or if it did happen, but she just needed to get out of there. So David and Linda were like, of course, you can come stay with us. We'll take care of you. And at first, Patty said it was great. It was a loving home. She didn't have any issues. It was a big change from what she was used to. A better change for her. However, sometime after she moved in, David started touching her. Remember, this is around the same age that Linda was when David started a relationship with her. And he would make a habit of when it was just the two of them, he would touch her. Any opportunity he could take. And he told her, that he was doing this for her. That she would become a proper lady sooner, and he was just preparing her for her future husband by doing all of this. And being 12, she thought that this was a good thing. She thought he was doing her a favor, and she felt like she owed him something because of this. David started going into Patty's room whenever Linda would leave to run some errands or whatever got her out of the house. He would take that opportunity to go into Patty's room, and he escalated from just touching her to having asexual encounters with her. And he started raping her regularly, and she thought that it was normal, that this is what people did, and that he was helping her by preparing her for when she was older and would get married. She was only 12, so she didn't see anything wrong with this. David and Linda had just had Crystal, so they had a new baby at home when all of this started happening with Patty. Not long after this, Cinnamon also moved in full-time with her dad, and she was 14 when she moved in with them. David told investigators later that Cinnamon was a very troubled girl and had moved in with him because her and her mom were constantly fighting. He said then they kind of started struggling in the household because Linda and Cinnamon could not get along. Anytime Linda would say something, Cinnamon would get angry. It was just a back and forth, he said. It was a very hostile environment. For the first few months that she lived there, Cinnamon and Patty did share a room. However, Linda got to the point where she was like, you know what, this isn't good for any of us. This isn't working. You're going to have to go move into the trailer out in the yard. She's 14, and you're kicking her out of the house to live in a trailer on the property. David did say that Cinnamon still came in to eat, have meals, watch TV, hang out. Like, she was still allowed in the home, but she was to sleep in the trailer. He said whenever she was in the house, though, she never spoke to anybody. She kind of just avoided everybody because it was uncomfortable. She had been kicked out, told to live in a trailer, so I could see why she wasn't wanting to make small talk or have conversations with any of you guys. It's just, she's 14. It's a very confusing time, and she now lives by herself, but has to come in and see these people who forced her to do it. Patty told the investigators later that Cinnamon had confided in her that she was feeling a bit suicidal. And Patty said, I reassured her that we all loved her, we all cared about her, we were all here for her. And Patty said, I felt like I got through to her and she didn't have those feelings anymore from my understanding. Now, this case is a murder. The day that Linda was shot, David said his parents had come over in the morning to kind of visit and spend the day with them. And they all played Uno for a while with the intentions of going on a family picnic. However, it did start raining, so they decided, we'll just stay inside and hang out for the day. David did have a chiropractor's appointment, and he decided he was going to take Cinnamon and Patty with him to go do this. After the appointment, he said they ended up going to 2 different restaurants to pick up dinner for everybody because some people wanted different foods. So they did all of that and they headed home. And he said in the car, Cinnamon was kind of acting like she was irritated and kind of being mean to Patty, and he didn't understand why. So when they got home, everybody ate dinner. Everything seemed fine at that point. But then Linda and David's mom got into a fight over the best way to care for Crystal when it came to sleeping. You see, David's mom was a person who believes to let them cry it out. If she's crying, she'll wear herself out, she'll go to sleep. But Linda, being the mom, was like, if she's crying and it's going on, I'm going to go get her. I'm going to comfort her. I'm not just going to let her scream herself to sleep. I'm It's not how I want to raise my daughter. And so this fight went on. His parents ended up leaving, but David made it known that he sided with his mom. He agreed with the letting her cry it out method. And this made him and Linda kind of get into a bit of a fight. And they finally decided, let's just go to bed. Done with the day, let's go to bed. David said he woke up around midnight and he couldn't stop thinking about the fight and everything, so he wanted to go for a drive to clear his head. Just take a moment away from the house to just kind of calm down. And he said he went by a convenience store to pick up a Dr. Pepper and to get an apple pie for a little midnight snack. And he went back to his car and realized that he also wanted to get some comic books. So he went back into the same store where he had a conversation with the cashier who thought it was funny that a man of his age was buying comic books. And he was very adamant to let the detectives know, I spoke with the cashier, we had this whole conversation, this is what we talked about. Kind of like he was making sure his alibi was good. Now, a little bit of a side note. At this time, David was 33 years old. When detectives got to the house, they were guessing he was maybe in his 50s because of how little David actually took care of himself and his health. He was not healthy. Now, he said after he got these comic books, he decided to drive down to the beach and just kind of sit there, listen to the water, clear his head before he headed home. And once he got home, Patty met him at the door when he walked in. He said she was frantic, she was holding Crystal, who was hysterical, and he was just like, what's going on, what's wrong? And Patty explained, Linda's been shot, I don't know what happened, I think she's dead, I didn't go check on her though, I grabbed Crystal, and I waited, and then I heard you, so I came downstairs. You didn't check on your sister? Your sister, you think, has been shot, and you're assuming that she's dead, but you didn't actually go check on her. Maybe she's not dead. Maybe she's wounded. Maybe she wasn't even shot. Maybe she's hiding. Maybe she's scared somewhere. But you didn't go look. That's a little strange. She told him that she thought it had been Cinnamon who did it. She remembers seeing somebody who looked like Cinnamon in the room, so she was guessing that Cinnamon had shot Linda. Patty told the detectives after David and Linda went to bed that night, she and Cinnamon had stayed up a little later watching TV, just kind of hanging out for the night. And around midnight, she was getting tired, so she told Cinnamon, hey, I'm gonna head to bed. And Cinnamon was like, okay, real quick before you go, can you show me how to use this? And she held up a small pistol. Patty was confused, and she was like, why do you have that? And Cinnamon was like, just for protection, just as a security precaution, just in case somebody breaks into the house. You never know, and I would like to know how it works. And Patty reassured her, David has really good security systems, and we're safe. If nobody's going to break into the house, everything's fine. But even with that being said, Patty showed her how to use the gun and then proceeded to just go to bed. Just like that was a normal thing for them. It's strange. A while after she went to bed, Patty said she woke up because she heard a gunshot, and it sounded like it had come from her room. So when she opened her eyes, she remembered seeing Cinnamon. And then a few moments later, I don't know if she fell back asleep, if she closed her eyes in confusion, but she said a few moments later she heard 2 more gunshots and she didn't see anybody. And then she heard Crystal start crying, so she ran into Crystal's room and grabbed her and locked them both into the room. She said she stayed there until she heard a knock at the front door before the keys in the lock. You have keys, but you're knocking on the front door. That'll come back later. That's when she ran downstairs and she realized David was home and explained everything that she knew, and the police showed up. But Patty also said David called his father first. Before calling the police to let them know what was happening, he made a call to his dad. And David also didn't go upstairs to check on Linda, to see what was happening, to see if she was okay, if she was actually dead. Nobody actually looked in on Linda. After investigators got everybody's stories that were there, they started looking around the house. They went into the trailer to see if they could find Cinnamon. They also had a couple of investigators wrangling up the dogs. The family had about 4 dogs that they wanted to get and put away just to be safe, so they didn't get out, didn't have to deal with them. They were just going to put them in some kennels. One of the investigators went to look in the dog houses that were behind the garage. And when he went to go look, he realized that there was a person in one of these dog houses. It turned out to be Cinnamon, and she was lying on the floor of one of the dog houses, covered in vomit and her own pee. She also was clutching a note in her hands that had a bow tied around it for some reason, and she looked very sick. He took her into custody and was able to pry the note out of her hand and read it, and it said, "Dear God, please forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt her." During her interview, she kind of kept zoning out, like she was lost in thought during all of this. Like, they're asking her questions of killing her stepmother, and she's in a far-off place, not even really focused. At one point, she did whisper, "Please don't let them get away with killing her." And they didn't really know what she was talking about or who she was talking about, because after this, she confessed to killing Linda. She said that she thought Linda hated her, and so she decided to get rid of her. A few days later, they questioned her again, but this time she decided she didn't want to talk to them. She said, "I've said all I needed to say. I don't have any more information. I can't remember anything else. I don't want to talk to you." She ended up being convicted for first-degree murder, and originally she was going to be sentenced to 27 years to life. However, because Cinnamon was only 14, she was sent to California's Youth Authority, and she was to serve her time there until she turned 25. Now, David didn't show up for the trial. Not to stand by his daughter, not to stand by his wife who had been murdered. He just didn't show up at all. Could not find the time to be there, to see what was happening, anything. He also didn't really visit Cinnamon when she was convicted. He told her, "I'll be here all the time, I'll come visit you." That never happened. So, as soon as Linda's life insurance policy was able to be withdrawn, David cashed in on it, and it was almost $1 million. And he took that money and he bought a new house in cash for him and Patty to live in. They ended up secretly getting married and even had a baby together. And if anybody questioned it, he would just say, she had a baby with somebody. He was helping her out by letting her live there, helping with the baby, but it wasn't his baby. Okay. Now, a side note from the case is everybody was tested for gunshot residue, and it did come back that Patty had gunshot residue on her hands. It was dismissed at the trial because Cinnamon confessed to killing Linda, so they didn't really need to bring in evidence of somebody else possibly committing the crime, but it was something that investigators kept in the back of their mind. In 1988, while in jail, Cinnamon ended up finding out that her father and Patty got married. and that they were living this high life off of the money that they got from Linda's life insurance. Now, after she was imprisoned, the detective still visited pretty regularly to talk to Cinnamon to see if there was anything new she wanted to say, anything maybe she could remember. They knew there was more to this story. It wasn't a simple case of Cinnamon thought Linda hated her, so she killed her. That was not, they didn't think that was all there was to it. Cinnamon was a model prisoner. She had a job in there. She kept herself pretty busy doing random crafts all the time. And she wasn't at all like David and Patty explained her to be. She wasn't this troublesome girl who caused problems, who was giving attitude, looking for a fight with everybody. She was the complete opposite of what they were describing her as. And Patty had even told them that Cinnamon had a lot of imaginary friends, and that she would prefer to talk to them versus talking to any of her family. And investigators were like, well, that's strange, because this is a high-stress situation. She's been arrested for killing her stepmother. She's going to jail. But at no point did she show any signs of talking to imaginary people, talking to herself. She didn't seem like anything like that was going on. And you would think if that were the case that she would still do it even after not living with her family. So they found this a strange little tidbit that Patty gave them. And, I mean, like I said, Cinnamon was doing great. She was really thriving in there, and she was going to therapy and mentally getting stronger, and detectives felt like, she was getting to the point where she was going to want to tell them the truth of what happened. Now, Cinnamon had a few friends, not a whole lot, but she had a couple that the investigators talked to just to kind of get a different viewpoint of who Cinnamon was. And they told them, Cinnamon was grounded most of the time. All the time, really. And she didn't really hang out with anybody because she couldn't. And they said that her father would freak out on her. If she said, hey, I'm going to go hang out with friends, he would just kind of freak out and be like, you don't need friends. Friends aren't necessary. You're fine without friends. So what is she to do? This is the things that she's being told and the way her father's reacting. I wouldn't get friends either. She kind of just became a loner because her father said there was no point to friends. After Cinnamon had learned about Patty and David's marriage, she did decide, I want to talk to the detectives. I want to tell them what really happened that night. And the DA, Jay Newell, he also wanted to be involved. He wanted to hear the story of what actually happened because everybody felt like there was more to it than what was already told. And she told them that David had been telling her and Patty for years that Linda was out to get him, that she was conspiring with her twin brother to have him murdered so that she could take his money and run away. He even said that they had mob ties, so he was in fear for his life, and he was convincing the girls that this was all true, that she was this horrible person out to get him, and they needed to protect him. These children needed to protect this grown-ass man. Cinnamon said David told them they had to get rid of Linda because it was the only way to move forward, and it had to be one of the girls because he couldn't stomach it. He was too much of a coward to kill her himself, so he convinced his young daughter and a young girl that he was molesting to do it for him. He had them brainwashed, thinking that they were protecting him, and this was the right thing to do. So it was decided, Cinnamon being the youngest, that she would be the one to actually kill Linda. He said, because you're so young, they won't prosecute you, you won't have a harsh sentence. At the most, you'll go to therapy for a little bit, and then you'll come home, and we can all live together and be happy. Cinnamon was convinced that David was telling the truth, and so she agreed, thinking that she was protecting her father, everything he was telling her was true, and Linda was this horrible, dangerous person. And they had done this, they had planned this for over a year. On the night of March 18th, David did wake up, like he said, but he also woke up Cinnamon and Patty and said, tonight's the night. We have to get rid of her tonight. And so he left to make his alibi and left the girls alone. When he came home that night, the reason that he knocked on the door was to let them know it was him, that it wasn't somebody else walking in or anything like that. It was a signal to be like, hey, I'm back. And the original plan was for Cinnamon to kill Linda, and then she was supposed to shoot herself in an attempted suicide. Cinnamon didn't want to do that. She didn't want to shoot herself. No, that was not part of the plan that she was okay with. So David was like, okay, well, the backup plan is I will make you a drink and I will put a bunch of pills in it and it'll look like you tried to take your life by ODing. And she was like, okay. Cinnamon thought that she was supposed to take just enough pills to look like she tried to take her life. What she didn't know was that David had given her a lethal dosage, and if she hadn't gotten sick and thrown it all up, she would have died as well. David's real plan all along was to get rid of Linda and Cinnamon so him and Patty could live this life together happily ever after in his mind. The detectives wanted to get David to incriminate himself because they didn't have real evidence. They only had Cinnamon's word. So they were like, okay, we'll set up a visit for your father to come see you and we'll put a wire on you and you see if you can get him to admit to any of this. And she was like, okay, that works. I'll do that. And so David agreed to come visit Cinnamon in jail, and she told him, look, I'm not doing really good in jail. I can't do this anymore. We need to tell the police the truth. And David, right away, was like, nope, we can't do that. We can't tell them the whole truth because I'm sick and they'll send me to jail and that won't be good for me. And nothing good will come of telling the whole truth because then we'll all be behind bars. And what good is that if we're all in jail? Like, that's not fair. So he incriminated himself very easily, very quickly, and he and Patty were arrested right after this. And Patty actually ended up in the same facility as Cinnamon because she was still underage. She was only 17 at the time. David tried to convince the investigators that he wasn't involved. This wasn't my idea. I had nothing to do with this. I have no idea what's going on. It was all Cinnamon and Patty. They planned it. They did this. I was in the dark. No. He also tried to hire another inmate to kill the DA on his case, along with Patty, his new wife, the girl he had been grooming for years. Like, that's not going to help your case, sir. And this inmate went straight to the authorities and was like, hey, this guy just tried to hire me to kill 2 people, so you should probably keep an eye on him, because he might try to hire somebody else. And Cinnamon, at the beginning, when they had first started planning this, and he was plotting all these seeds of Linda's a bad person, Cinnamon was like, why don't you just get divorced? Because David had 5 marriages by the age of 33. So it wasn't like he was unfamiliar with divorce. You could always get a divorce. But his reasoning was, well, if I divorce her, she'll take all of my money, and then what will I have? So it would be better if we just kill her so we can keep all of our money, and then we'll have more money from her life insurance. It's crazy. So Patty and Cinnamon actually did end up reconciling because they were in the same facility and they were able to talk to each other. And they both realized that they had been taken advantage of, that they had been brainwashed by David into believing all of these lies and that they were protecting him. And it didn't take them long after being just the two of them to realize that none of this would have happened if it wasn't for him. So they agreed to both testify against him at his trial, which Patty explained their relationship from the age of 12, all of the things that David had done to her, which was not good for David to start his trial by saying he's a pedophile, and he had always been one, because he'd done the same thing with her sister Linda. Cinnamon also testified and explained how they were brainwashed, and she said that he would constantly, if they ever questioned it or ever got worried or weren't really into the plan, he would just say, "If you love me, you'll do this." And so they didn't know what else to do. They thought they were doing the right thing for him. The jury only took 7 hours to deliberate and find him guilty, and David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Cinnamon and Patty were released not long after this verdict, and at the time, Cinnamon was 18. She did go on and get married and had been married for 20 years until, unfortunately, her husband took his own life. She did end up remarrying, and as far as I can see, she's just living a quiet life out of the public eye, which she deserves. Crystal and Patty ended up reconnecting as well, and Crystal ended up forgiving them both, realizing what her father had done, and that he was to blame for her losing her mother. Patty and David's child ended up with one of Patty's siblings, but there isn't any other information about him or her. Don't even know what they had, to be honest. And the best way to end this is that David died on March 20th, 2014, of natural causes at the age of 61, because his lifestyle finally caught up to him. Not taking care of himself health-wise, he didn't live a very long life. I want to thank you all for joining me today and listening to Cinnamon's case and Linda's case, and I hope everybody has a great day and stay safe. I never know the right way to end these things, so I will be talking to you guys later.